Welcome to the Zinnov podcast. You're listening to our Business Resilience series, where we bring to you conversations between eminent industry stalwarts and thought leaders from across the globe as they discuss their insights on overcoming challenges and the mindset that help them navigate the journey of crisis, resilience, and growth.
Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Business Resilience series of the Zinnov podcast. I'm your host today, Nilesh Thakker, the president of Zinnov. Today we are thrilled to be speaking with Peter George, the Chief Technology Officer at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, also known as HMH, a leading provider of educational content, technology, and services. I've known Peter for several years, but Peter brings in more than 30 years of experience in software and technology field and is responsible for leading HMH's technology vision and execution. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks, Nilesh. Glad to be here.
So let me get started. So Peter, you've been setting up global teams specifically in places like India. I know you've told me about multiple teams in Pune over the last few decades. How do you ensure global integration across teams across the world working together as a cohesive unit?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, and you're right. I have been doing this for a long time, both in India and in other countries also. So I've had the challenge of managing teams that are supposed to collaborate and work together on delivering integrated solutions, but are actually located all around the world. And so I think there's a couple of elements to my philosophy for how to approach this. Sort of core to it is that I like to set up my teams as equal peers, each with a clear mission, each as independent as possible with the resources they need to be as successful as possible while being autonomous, but also recognizing that they have to collaborate with the other teams, right? Because at the end of the day, we're trying to deliver an integrated solution. The first step, I think, is to set up the teams to be as self-sufficient as possible. And then the second part is to say, okay, what are the mechanisms we're going to put in place to then have you collaborate with the other teams? And there's multiple mechanisms that I use and sort of operate at multiple levels.
No, I think that's great. And, I just saw that your team in India was recognized within a year as one of the best teams set up. Now, again, the other thing I keep hearing when I talk to leaders that, hey, productivity can be challenging to measure. In general, it's hard to measure in software development, especially when there is no single metric which people have agreed to. So how do you approach the challenge with globally distributed teams? Like, first of all, how do you think about productivity from a software perspective, and then how have you measured that? So
Yeah, it's a question that I've always actually found pretty tricky because there's a couple of dimensions to it, right? One is the issue if you focus on a single metric, you can get undesirable side effects to other metrics, right? Because if people know that you're really focused on measuring this one thing, they might do the wrong thing with respect to other metrics. So you got to be careful about that. And then the other thing is just in the software business, having a universal metric to measure productivity has been an elusive goal. Right. The way we approach it actually is, so there is a good productivity metric you can use for individual teams, right? And velocity is commonly used, the velocity of story points. And we use that, to look at individual teams and to note their progress and evolution over time. Right? And you generally would like to see that velocity increasing over time. And if there's breakdowns in it, you'd like to understand what's going on and why. So that's the core productivity metric we use on an individual team basis. But in order to make sure that we don't get undesirable side effects, we try to include that in what I think of as a more balanced scorecard. So it's not the only metric we'll look at. We look at a handful of metrics for each team. And by looking at the combination of them, we think we get a better understanding of what's going on. And we also make sure that we're not over-indexing in one dimension versus the others.
okay, great. How do you ensure that the teams are fully productive quickly? I think you mentioned some of that earlier, but
Yeah.
are there anything specific which has worked for you? Because I think what you've been able to do in Pune is pretty amazing. So what are some of the tips you can share besides the
Yeah.
governance part you talked about? So
Yeah. Well, I think the most important part of it is to establish a good partnership between the former team and the new team, right? Because this handoff is so critically important, right? So obviously we start by building a new team that we think is going to be capable of picking up the work, right? That we've provided with all the skills. And we try to provide our teams with both front end and back end engineers. They have their scrum masters, they have their product owners, they have everything that they need to be successful. And then when we get to the point where we have maybe the majority of the team in place or the key leadership of the team in place, at that point, we feel we can start triggering the knowledge transfer process, right? And we can engage the former team in saying, okay, let's get some training in place. Let's start talking to the new team and introducing them to what's going on. And, and ideally that would also include travel of some sort, because, there's a lot we can do virtually and there's a lot we can do by, in writing and things like that. But I would say that in my experience, there's no substitute for actually putting the leadership face to face and sitting down and sort of breaking bread over the challenges and the knowledge transfer and things like that. It also starts building the trust, because another issue in this whole mix of getting teams up to speed is teams feeling comfortable with the handoff, right? Because basically they're handing off their baby to a new parents, right? And they need to feel comfortable that will work well. So anyway, so once we have those basic ingredients in place, we have a team, a new team stood up. We have the partnership being established, the knowledge transfer in place. Then we sort of get into the operational details of it. So so we have a model where we're ramping down the work that the former team is doing as we're ramping up the work the new team is doing. So that they might start with some smaller projects and things like that, while some other stuff is still being done by the current team. And then ultimately you start shifting the balance, and you get to the point where the new team is fully self-sufficient and is taking full ownership. That can take a little bit of time as we go through that. We've used some tactics like using contractors to bridge some of the gaps in knowledge and things like that to speed things up. But generally, I think once you build that good partnership between the former owners and the new owners, and everybody gets on board with what we're trying to do, and you get the relationship built, the process goes reasonably smoothly.
Now, there's obviously everybody's talking about AI, so I think I have to too. So have you used any new AI tools for boosting productivity, or what has been your experience, or is it still too early for you?
Yeah. So, AI is a big topic, right? It's both a hot topic these days, of course, as you know. It's also, it covers a lot of ground. So let me answer sort of maybe in two parts. So first of all, we've been using AI technology for a long time at HMH. In particular, we've been using machine learning technologies for a long time. And we have seen tremendous results with the machine learning. So in particular, we've used them to completely replace some of the manual high volume content categorization work that we need to do as part of our solutions. And the savings in those areas are truly extraordinary, because basically we're eliminating what was a highly manual repetitive process. I mean, just completely eliminating it with something that can be automated. So that's really been extraordinary. Now the hot topic, of course, is the generative AI capabilities.
Exactly.
And I would say, we're still a little bit early in our experience with that. I mean, we are using them. We are actively using the generative AI technologies, but where we haven't quite gotten to the point where we've gotten really great qualitative feedback that they're very helpful, but we haven't quite gotten to the point where we have the quantitative analysis to say, hey, we're getting a 15% or a 25% or whatever it is boost in productivity. Just to talk a little bit about what we're doing, we have rolled out a Microsoft Co-pilot to a couple of hundred HMH employees to help with general productivity. We've rolled out a CodeGPT to all our engineers to help with their productivity. We've rolled out other generative AI tools to all our content developers to help them with their authoring. And as I said, the initial qualitative feedback from everybody is enthusiastic and positive. But the key question is, what does that translate into quantitatively? So we expect to do a before and after analysis of velocity within individual teams that are using the tools and see what kind of impact that has. Don't have them quite yet to share with you. Maybe that's a topic for a future conversation or a future podcast. I'm happy to talk about it again later when we have a little bit more of that hard data.
But I mean, it seems like the early indications are that at least from the people using it, it's a positive trend.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. So. And, and our emphasis, like I think a lot of companies and a lot of people is, we're not using it to replace people. We're using it to augment their productivity, right? So Absolutely. The idea is, and we also still want our engineers, our authors, whatever, to take responsibility for the ultimate results, right? So use these tools to help you get a jump start, to help move things along more quickly in the technical world, to generate tests for us and things like that, for example. But at the end of the day, you still need to be personally responsible for the results.
No, that's great. So, Peter, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for sharing your perspectives. I always enjoy talking to you. I can always learn something new from you. So,
all right, great. I appreciated the opportunity to chat. It was a great conversation.
And, just to kind of summarize what Peter said, I mean, setting up global teams is almost required these days, but doing it the right way, setting the right governance process in place, making sure that you focus on not only the governance, but also relationships, making sure that you're not only thinking of your organization, thinking across the product groups. And at the end of the day, making sure that the people transferring the work and people receiving the work, they all have a shared vision is what's going to make you successful. So focus on those important aspects. Just don't focus on, hey, how much work is being done. Those are initial effort you put in to make sure those things are in place will really make your journey a lot more smoother and actually in the long term faster. So thank you, Peter, and thank you for tuning into this episode. We'll be back soon with another leader and another exciting topic. Till then, take care and stay curious.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Business Resilience Series. Stay tuned for more such interesting episodes. You can listen to our podcast on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast from. To know more about Zinnov, visit our website, www.zinnov.com, or drop us a note at info@zinnov.com. Follow us on Twitter @Zinnov for regular updates on our content. Thank you again for listening to the Business Resilience Series of the Zinnov Podcast.